I want to talk to you a little bit about these glass ceilings. You've heard the expression before, right? And it wouldn't be an Ideas That Matter podcast if we didn't take an idea that you knew and ask ourselves, what is the genesis of the idea glass ceiling? But more importantly, how do glass ceilings make themselves manifest in our lives today? The term glass ceiling actually originally refers to an invisible barrier that prevents certain groups of people. It's used in particular reference to women or minorities. These are people who are seen to be on the sidelines of the mainstream of society. And it's used to explain how those people are kept from advancing beyond a certain level within an organization of society where the organization of society is hierarchical. So there are a couple of themes there for us to think about. First, the organization of society has to be hierarchical. Second, it's got to be organized into a particular fashion, ergo organization and or society. And third, these barriers are, and I mentioned the word earlier, invisible. In other words, they are not imminently present. You can't see them. They're not apparent in front of you. But they're very clear in terms of how people function, move, work, and play, even in their own societies. The other thing for you to understand is often these glass ceilings exist despite the capabilities, qualifications, talents, or abilities of the people against whom these glass ceilings are being placed. So in other words, it's not that you're not capable or talented, or not even that you're qualified. It's that regardless of your being all of those things, there is this barrier in front of you that is invisible to the eye, but clear in terms of your lived experience. This metaphor, the glass ceiling, suggests then that there is, as I've said earlier, a barrier that is not immediately apparent or visible, like a glass, and this is precisely why it is called the glass ceiling. When we talk about the glass, this concept of the glass ceiling, and when we talk about the glass in the context of mental and psychological barriers, what we're doing is we're extending the metaphor then to some that can be self-imposed, and here for me is where I really want to spend time. Here's my thought. If we have a psychological or mental barrier, and that psychological or mental barrier is imposed on us by society, where there are some amongst us who have the means to understand that, we can fight back. This is why you have, for instance, the critical theory movement, critical race theory, critical gender theory. Both of these aim at tackling different parts of society's glass ceilings based on different people's belongings or different ethnographic groups, right? What happens, is my question here, if the barrier is self-imposed? You see, you can fight a barrier if the barrier is imposed on you by others because you'll feel the imposition. It's much harder to fight the barrier that's self-imposed. These barriers that are self-imposed are self-imposed limits that we place on ourselves, self-imposed limits that we place on our potential, our aspirations, on our growth, our goals, our dreams. These mental and psychological glass ceilings often stem from the very fact that we come from society that has various expectations, we come from cultures that have different norms, and we have experiences at a personal level that shape who we are in the world and the beliefs we go into the world with. As a function of these, we believe that our capabilities and our worth are often framed by the context of the environment. There's this beautiful video I saw some time ago. It was a beautiful, beautiful video on Instagram. I forget the lady's name, but she's a fairly well-known American celebrity, and she sat in an interview and she said something like, if you visited a friend of yours and you saw a plant, that they were keeping a plant in their home and the plant had died, who would you blame? Your friend or the plant? Of course, the person who was responding said, your friend. She said, exactly. Because you know that it's in the nature of a plant to grow. You know that it's in the nature of a flower to bloom. It's in its nature. Where you find then that the plant doesn't grow and the flower doesn't bloom, you know that it is the environment that the flower is kept in, not the character or the nature of the flower. And I think so many of us forget that. We forget that actually a number of us are shaped by our environments. You think you have self-belief. You think you have self-determination. You think you're a clean slate. You're not. You are an amalgamation of your personal experiences that have shaped your beliefs, beliefs that have channeled your habits, habits that have formed your character, character that pre-places your personality, and your personality is how you show up in the room. But all of these things emanate from a deeper place. If we want to understand these glass ceilings, there are 6, for me, fundamental things you need to understand about how these glass ceilings make themselves manifest in your life very quickly. First, you'll see these glass ceilings when you have self-doubt or imposter syndrome. We did an entire podcast about 2 years ago on the imposter syndrome. I can't recommend enough that you go and listen to that podcast. In fact, the other day I was walking out of the gym in South Africa. I was at the gym and I was walking out of the gym and a lady walked up to me and she said, "Hi, you don't know me. My name is so-and-so." I forget her name. And I'm stood by the elevator, furiously pressing the button because I'm one of those people, like when I'm in public, I try to be invisible, right? So I don't want to be seen, like I wear a hoodie when I'm at the gym so I can just do my own thing. But this lady was pressing the button furiously, and I was pressing the button furiously around. And she came to me and she said, "Listen, I know you're in a rush. I can see you've just finished your workout, but I wanted to say to you, I just the other day listened to your podcast, The Imposter Syndrome, and man, it was eye-opening." So if you have not yet listened to that podcast, make sure that you go and listen to the Imposter Syndrome podcast. It's really, really good. But the first way these glass ceilings make themselves manifest in our life is when we have self-doubt and imposter syndrome. Many people experience imposter syndrome, right? Like that's not a unique thing anymore. Almost all of us do. It's a psychological pattern where individuals doubt their accomplishments. And listen to this because this is important. And you have a persistent, internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. This can lead to self-imposed limits. You are the person that stands in your own way. And so instead of seeking opportunities or taking risks, you disqualify yourself from opportunities and you think you're not worthy of the risks or that they don't work out because you think there is something wrong with you. The second is these societal and cultural norms. Societal expectations and cultural norms, these can create mental glass ceilings for us by dictating what is considered acceptable or achievable for a certain group of people. And so if a certain group of people don't immediately present at a certain level of achievement, we don't believe that other people can achieve at that level. This is why representation matters, you see. Representation matters precisely because you want to care for and ensure that people who've never seen themselves as something can see themselves in something. Did you hear that? It's not just seeing themselves as, it's seeing themselves in. In other words, it's not just seeing myself as a pilot, it's seeing myself in the cockpit. Most of us, when we do visualization exercises, see ourselves as, but true visualization is seeing yourself in. You've got to be in that car, be in that house, be in that country, be in that room. This is why as a public speaker I've become so effective at my craft, is because I learned the power of visualization. When I'm standing there visualizing my performance, I see myself not only through the eyes of the audience, but also I see the audience through the eyes of me. I visualize the full experience from a 360. And so my body then and my physiology readies itself for that process because it knows we're ready for this. Did you hear that? See yourself as and see yourself in. Think about it this way. If you think about traditional gender roles, they often can discourage certain genders from doing certain things. In fact, this is why in the critical theory movement, there is a belief that words are loaded with discrimination. I have, by the way, I must tell you, I have portals of agreement with the critical theory movement, and then there's just places where I just flatly disagree with, in particular when it becomes a lot more extreme in its extrapolations of how these critical theories affect our lives. But I do think, like all theories, and this is why people misunderstand the critical theory movement, it's a theory. In other words, it's a lens through which you can assess and analyze society. It's a theory. I do think, like all theories, that the critical theory movement can help you analyze certain things in society and understand them better. Not all things. It's not a flawless theory. It's not without imperfections. But it does have tenets of analysis that you can use to understand the operating environment you are in better. So what am I saying here? Quite simply this. If I say a word like nurse, what gender did you see? If I say builder or plumber, what gender did you see? Do you see that? If I say the pool person or the paper boy, how come it's never paper girl? So words then can be loaded with discrimination. This is why you can say a certain thing. If you characterize somebody and say they're a thug, even though you have not yet told us what they're thuggish about, you have now discriminated against them by labeling them with a word that's loaded with characterization. And society does this to us all the time. You're young, you're old, you're fat, you're skinny, you're female, you're short, you're whatever. And they use all of these things to disqualify you from your capabilities, potential, gifts, and talents. And so, because society does that, it places upon you this invisible barrier, this glass ceiling. You hear that thing often enough and you begin to believe that even those things are true. I'm here to tell you that they're not. The third way that it makes itself manifest is the fear of failure. The fear of failure is a big one. And I want to be clear here, failure is something that can happen, but the fear of failure can act as a significant barrier. It's your inability, because what it does is the fear of failure, is it amplifies your inability to take the risk because of your perceived risk on the other side of it. And so you amplify the downside risk without necessarily understanding the upside opportunity. See, this fear can prevent you from stepping out of your comfort zone, trying new things, leading to these self-imposed limitations on both your personal and professional growth. There is somebody listening to this podcast right now who was doing the job that they said they would leave a year ago. You're still in the marriage that you said you were out of a year ago. You're still in that relationship that you were re-examining a year ago. You still live in the city that you said you would leave a year ago. Because you have imposed upon yourself the belief that the potential for failure is higher than the probability for success. But more, and more to the point, that the pain for failure is infinitely more painful than the joy of succeeding. In sales, by the way, you're taught to leverage this. People buy based on what they stand to lose, not what they hope to gain. If you're selling something to somebody, amplify the pain rather than amplify the benefit. Benefits are nice, but people can choose not to go after benefits. Very few people choose not to remove the pain. The fourth, lack of representation. And we spoke about this earlier. Seeing fewer and fewer role models of a similar background in the space that you're in can itself have a way of creating these glass ceilings. The fifth, and this is a big one, negative self-talk and beliefs. Listen, negative self-talk is not just how you talk about yourself, it's the fact that you also have to talk to yourself. I'm not sure why a lot of you don't know that, but these two things are both true. You not only have to talk to yourself, you also have to talk about yourself. Just hear me out on this. This is so powerful. Sometimes I will be in a room alone. If you share this with anybody, by the way, I will flatly deny it. But sometimes I'll be in a room alone. This is a true story. Sometimes I'll be in a room alone and I'll be talking in a room alone to me alone about me. I will talk about Vusi as if I'm talking about Vusi to somebody else. And I will talk about the version of me that I want to become, the version of me that I'm working to become. Because I know that the more my brain hears those things said about me, and then the more my brain hears me say those things about me, the closer my brain believes those things to be true. It's just a rewiring, really. And it's so foundational to do this. And sixth is external validation seeking. This is one of the ways you can tell when people have lived in an environment that has truly imposed these glass ceilings, is you're constantly seeking affirmation, constantly coddling at the cradle of somebody else's feet, hoping that they're going to tell you that you're worthy, that they will invite you into the room, that they will give you an opportunity, constantly saying, validate me, please tell me I'm on the right path. If you've ever worked with these people, these are the people who are the chronic people pleasers, to the extent that they will lie to other people and even lie to themselves. They don't have the capacity to hold a disagreement. They don't have the capacity to be disagreeable, and it's so foundational that you learn how to get out of external self-seeking. The need for external validation can make us less likely to pursue our paths that are true to our interests and our abilities, and paths that might not conform to the standards of society. See, if you want to overcome all of these mental and psychological glass ceilings, it's so important to engage. 1, in self-reflection. 2, in challenging your limiting beliefs. 3, seek out supportive and diverse communities, and sometimes even work with an external person.